Hello, dear friend. Thank you for hanging out with a couple of multiples today. We are your hosts, Drew
and Garden System. We are a married couple that both have Dissociative Identity Disorder, or DID.
The reality of living with multiplicity is nothing like what you might see in the movies or on soap operas. This mental health condition often goes unnoticed, even by mental health professionals. Did you know that someone with DID spends an average of 6 to 12 years in the mental health system before receiving a correct diagnosis? This is because there is still a prevailing belief, even among clinicians, that DID is rare. The truth is that there are around 120 million people all over the world that meet the criteria according to the DSM-5.
We are glad that you are here to learn all about dissociative identity disorder. Whether you are someone living with multiplicity, a supporter, or a mental health professional, you are making a difference by choosing to listen to this podcast today. You can help dispel myths about DID and help spread awareness by sharing this podcast with a friend or loved one.
Please visit acoupleofmultiples.com and sign up for our mailing list to learn all about our private paid community called Hearts Multiplied on the Circle platform. If you're enjoying this podcast, please consider giving us a 5-star review. And for our Apple listeners, we would really appreciate you leaving us a written review.
Together, we can make a difference by taking the disorder out of dissociative identities. We are honored to have a Gold Plus sponsor for Season 2.
The Institute for Creative Mindfulness is one of the largest EMDR therapy training programs in North America, founded and directed by Dr. Jamie Pless-Marich, author of Dissociation Made Simple. Dr. Jamie is the only EMDR therapy trainer who is out as a plural, and since 2015, she's offered the full EMDR therapy basic training in a way that honors lived experience and destigmatizes dissociation in clinical work.
We have never felt more accepted and validated as a multiple than when we were able to show up authentically as Garden System for our basic EMDR training. Having lived experience is valued and respected in these training courses.
Go to www.instituteforcreativemindfulness.com for a full list of upcoming trainings, both online and in person, offered by Dr. Jamie and her selected network of EMDR trainers.
Are you interested in becoming a sponsor? Please send an email to admin@acoupleofmultiples.com to request more information.
Hello, dear friends, and welcome to another noteworthy episode with Drew
and Garden System, a couple of multiples. The reality of dissociative identity disorder. We've been diving into internal communication this season, and you can check out previous episodes where we talk about learning to listen and building bonds with all of yourselves and so much more. For this episode, we want to dive into how we resolved internal conflicts, how we determined what was best for all of us, how we utilized everyone's strengths, and how we keep up with all the daily little things.
Yeah, because if we were being honest, all those little things, if not managed or left without a plan, can become very big things. So yes, let's get started.
Something I brought up in a previous episode was this idea of trust by proxy. I'll share how this worked for 3 of ourselves. For example, Kilera trusts Leanna to manage important financial aspects of life, and Leanna trusts Kilera to protect all of us from unkind people in the world. As you might recall from previous episodes, Jenny is one of my littles and also my gatekeeper. And she was rather suspicious of Kilera and lacked trust in Kilera's ability to make smart choices about our romantic life. Yet, Jenny trusted Leanna wholeheartedly in all things. Her trust in Leanna allowed her to start offering just enough trust in Kilera. So Leanna became the bridge to strengthen that relationship between Kilera and Jenny. Whenever Kilera did something that Jenny did not like or that Jenny questioned as a good idea, Leanna could step in and remind Jenny that she was there too and watching. This was reassuring to Jenny.
I like the whole trust by proxy concept and how it works between dissociative identities within a system. A current situation we are facing as a family of selves, doing this life thing together, is the reemergence of my longtime dormant self that does go by my legal name, Amber. I've mentioned her briefly in other episodes. The last period of time when she was out in the body consistently was when we were married to our ex-husband in our very early 20s. She could not bear the divorce and had remained dormant for over a decade. Only a couple of years ago did she resurface, wondering where we were at. Her last memory was us living in Utah. We moved to Florida over 10 years ago, and she also had to come to terms with that her body had aged, that she was a person with a system selves, and that we had married a woman that has 4 teenagers. I, Lizzie, who has acted like the system or family leader or host, as some people term it, since Amber went dormant, has had to use the whole trust by proxy thing when adjusting to Amber being back, specifically because her life is not the life she had envisioned. At first, Amber was focused on changing everything, our life, which was super scary for me, but over the last little while, with the help of Journey, one of my other adult selves who has become my better half internally, I have learned to be patient and listen when it comes to communicating, and in my words, dealing with Amber. Because my goodness, could you imagine waking up one day, figuring out you are on the other side of the country, living a life you weren't involved in creating at all? I trust my other Journey with all my heart. And that trust by proxy, the fact that Journey trusts that Amber isn't going to do anything drastic, even though she has thoughts, is the only thing that is keeping me sane right now.
I think a huge fear that people with dissociative identities have is oneself in particular taking over and making choices that lead to negative consequences for the whole system. We did an episode on eating disorders with Annie Goldsmith recently, and choices about food and eating behaviors is another conflict that arises between ourselves. The main one being littles love sweets and sugar, and the adults are concerned about health, weight, body size, etc. For us, Keelara gets frustrated because her actual body doesn't look or feel anything like the internal body that Keelara has. It's uncomfortable for her to front sometimes. And when she does, she wants to do something about the external body to make it more like what she has internally. Leanna has had to help mediate between her and the others to help us have a more healthy way of eating and being in this body that we all have to share. When Keelara stopped being roary at the littles, they were able to hear her better. Keelara had to compromise and agree to some modifications, and the littles had to do the same. We had to come up with a meal plan that worked for all of us. Keelara was able to get the littles on board with that gentle reminder that we all have to share this body. As a reminder, remember to work with your dietitians or nutritionists, doctors, and trained eating disorder therapists when creating solutions around food and exercise. It's a plan that will need to account for all of yourselves, though.
I think what you said right there is key. It's a plan that will need to account for all of yourselves. It's that very concept that I, Lizzie, have to constantly remind myself of. What I'm trying to make a part of my past is working from the idea that safety equals me having to be the one out in the body 24/7. Me making most or all the decisions for my team of selves is not very team or family oriented at all, even if I'm not intentionally doing it to be that way. I try to take over everything because I want to know what's going on. Realizing that my others, like Amber, want the very same thing, to know what's going on and at least have a say in it, it makes complete sense to me and allows me to have empathy for my other selves and realize the importance of me taking the time to check in with everyone and see what their thoughts, ideas, wishes, wants, and our needs are regarding our life. This is not just my life. The consequences of me continuing to make decisions on my own for all of us are possible complete takeovers by other selves, which I definitely don't want happening. And also lots of internal chaos, noise, crying, tantrums, sadness, and grief for the life, choices, or decisions my others wished were happening but are not.
Exactly. I think this is where some treatment modalities struggle. They are created with the idea of singleness, and there isn't always a focus on what all selves need. There's even a little bit of fear or concern about worsening the dissociative experiences by including all selves. However, you have to address everyone and include everyone in decision-making processes in order to lessen the dissociative experiences.
I completely agree with this. My world has gotten better since I got to know myself and got communication going about what everyone wants and needs. The internal chaos and unhappiness has lessened dramatically, and the combination of strengths from all selves becomes a powerful driving force in daily life. Garden System, do you have an example of when you included many of yourselves in the decision-making process? Would you explain how it worked and the positive and negative aspects of including multiple parts and making this decision in your example?
We have several, actually. Making the decision to date women was one. Another was choosing to go back to school and change careers. Most of our daily decisions these days involve each and every one of us that wants to have a say. It really starts with one part voicing a want or a need and then allowing others to respond. Each self sort of makes their case for a particular decision, and those with opposing views work on choosing or making a compromise. When it came to the dating arena, back when we were still single, most of us were indifferent, but there were two selves in particular that each felt very strongly about the subject. We've talked about them in previous episodes, Kilera and Victoria. Victoria approached the discussion from a conservative Christian moral perspective, while Kilera came at it by analyzing our past dating history. As they discussed their thoughts and viewpoints, others of us would chime in and offer their insight and perspective. With everyone's input, it helped Victoria see that what we had been trying to do just wasn't working for us or anyone in our system. She conceded with, "Well, we can try and see if it works out better." She wasn't thrilled at first, but as we all know, I married Drew here, and even she, meaning Victoria, admits that it was one of our best decisions. This discussion was so important because we had to get everyone on the same team and in agreement, even if parts were skeptical. Victoria agreeing to proceed allowed us to develop a beautiful relationship without any of the typical self-sabotage that would come along when one self tries to do things just their way. I suppose a negative side is that having these conversations is very time consuming. It took months before Kilera and Victoria reached an agreement that everyone in the system was happy with. It takes a lot of patience, but the wait is well worth the time and energy invested. Choosing to go back to school wasn't so much of a discussion as it was what everyone wanted to do. It wasn't really a conflict, but it was something that all of us discussed together. Everyone agreed that everyone would participate in school and learn, and everyone shows up every day to work now. Everyone provides input into the work that we do.
Some of our listeners might be curious about when you just said, everyone shows up every day to work now. You say they provide input into the work that you do, but how does that look when the body obviously has just one set of vocal cords?
It's listening. These are internal conversations that take place inside. We listen to each other and act in agreement. Things that we say verbally with our one mouth are an accumulation of ideas and words from all of us. Sometimes we might be slow to respond or answer verbally because we're busy listening and attempting to combine all of that into one set of words that is said by whoever happens to be fronting, which is usually Sadie. Sometimes there are disagreements that are then worked out internally by talking it out with each other. If one self wants to say something and someone disagrees with what is being said, then it doesn't get said until it's worked out between the selves. Usually the first self will just think of another way to say what needs to be said and tweak it until the others are satisfied.
Yeah, it's headache producing for sure. And I relate very much with how you described how these internal discussions go. As an outside person, waiting for a person with DID to figure it all out and respond can take patience as well. Sometimes I have to consciously turn off the "what is she thinking" thoughts aside and just wait without trying to guess what is all going through her mind. Because as another person with DID, I know it's a lot. And I try to remind myself that the time it is taking for her to figure out what she has decided or how to respond doesn't have to do with me. Sometimes that's hard.
So true. There's so much internal chatter sometimes, and you just have to slow down and give everyone a chance to speak. It's like leading a business meeting or something sometimes. And I know that the glazed look over our eyes can be unnerving to outside people, even when that other person also has DID. What are some internal conflicts you all had, and how did you work them out?
Yeah. Well, there are the daily internal conflicts that happen, like what to wear and what to eat and what things need to get done first and so on. And then there are like the big decisions in life that all of us have to come to some sort of agreement on, like the ones you were talking about, garden system. Honestly, sometimes daily internal conflicts are just as bad as the so-called big decisions. I'm not sure I've come up with some foolproof way for my others to not ever have meltdowns over like what we're wearing or eating, but there are some things I do on a regular basis to try to avoid the meltdowns. And a lot of it has to do with coming up with compromises and taking turns so everyone feels valued. I mean, the body can only wear an outfit or two at most a day and can only eat so much without having issues. With choosing what to wear, I have found that the thing that works best is choosing what I'll wear the night before. That way, I'm not late for work arguing amongst myself or crying on the closet floor, because that's totally happened. Also, if it's a work day, Lizzie and Journey get to choose what we wear the next day because they are the ones going to work. If it's a weekend, we have a little more time and whoever is out in the body gets to choose because it doesn't really matter as much. It also helps to have this to say to the others that aren't Lizzie and Journey. You will get a chance to wear what you want to wear on the weekend. Sometimes that means saying you, specific part, gets to choose what we wear on Saturday. And you, specific part, gets to decide what to wear on Sunday. All this thinking and planning does really avoid a lot of conflict and helps all people in the system feel like what they want matters.
It's exhausting, but well worth the effort. There have been so many times that no choice was made because it took too long for everyone to settle on a decision. Like we were supposed to eat dinner at 6 and suddenly it's 9 p.m. and time for bed. Sometimes we couldn't decide what movie to watch, so we ended up not watching anything at all. And then there's usually an internal meltdown, or even an external one. Learning to take turns was an important part of our internal communication.
So true. Sometimes it gets so frustrating and yes, exhausting trying to make a decision that we end up not really deciding, just like Garden System said. But yeah, kind of having a system like you get to decide this day and you get to decide that day can and does help. As far as big decisions go, I can't say that all the parts get what they want. I mean, we do have to make one decision for some things, and some parts are having to settle. But I think what is important is that those parts that are having to settle on a big decision that is made are allowed to see some of what they want in life actually happen. And it's important to really plan for that. For example, one of my adult parts, Amber, really wouldn't have chosen to be with a woman. But when we talked to her about exactly why, it really comes down to the fact that she really wanted to have a baby. So, as a compromise, we are really trying to make the baby thing happen. It helps Amber feel like her dreams aren't completely dashed. Some of how we ultimately make decisions is based on what is best for the system as a whole. Now we realize what is, quote, best for the system as a whole as a little based on opinion. However, if the majority of the parts agree something is best and can list out some reasons, then it is easier to get the parts on board that don't agree because of the reasons and the majority. Again, with the parts that don't agree, we have found that asking them specifically why they don't agree is important, and addressing those reasons and taking them seriously really matters.
Also, validating the feelings selves will have when they don't get what they want. Acknowledging that the choice made wasn't what that part wanted. And offering a little bit of empathy or condolences has gone a long way to mitigating some of those temper tantrums. Listen, acknowledge, address, communicate. These are all so important when resolving conflicts and making decisions. Deciding what's best for everyone really comes down to letting everyone have their input. hearing them out, and ultimately coming up with an agreement is how we've been operating for several years now. Some decisions are big and require everyone, and some are small and handled between just two selves sometimes. Learning to share and take turns with each other, all the things we learned in kindergarten. Yeah, that's what it takes to get a little bit of internal peace for sure.
Okay, wifey, I know you have some experience with this question. What if parts don't or can't talk? How do you include them?
Fantastic question. You have some experience with this too, though.
Yes, I do. But yous go first. I asked first.
Okay. Yes, we have several parts that struggle with speaking. Maisie, for one, does not talk hardly at all. She's got selective mutism and really has to be in a situation where she really takes on being a protector. She'll speak mostly when she feels threatened. Although she did recently start talking to our therapist, which is pretty exciting. Also, some of our littles are too little to talk. They are unable to use words to communicate with the rest of the system. They still find ways to let all of us know what they want, though. They might respond with crying or temper tantrums, and then we know something is up. They might be able to pull up a visual image in our head to communicate whatever their need is. That's how it works for you with your nonverbal self.
Yeah, mostly when she wants to eat chicken. She shows me a picture in her head of like a chicken sandwich or the Zaxby's chicken sign, or now, since you recently brought her to Culver's, the Culver's blue sign. Sometimes she's the only one that wants chicken. I mean, hi Lizzie, I'm pretty much a vegetarian. But then I kind of want to give Sparkle what she wants because she's really quite a sweet part of mine, and I kind of feel badly that she doesn't talk at all. So sometimes we eat spicy chicken sandwiches just for her. And that's how it goes. So yeah, for my one nonverbal part, well, now that I think about it, I do have more nonverbal parts because some of my parts are animals, but they really aren't a part of the decision making in the current life out in the body.
Well, Snow, our Siberian tiger, makes his opinion known in our system.
Thanks for that. Yeah, so with Sparkle, our nonverbal part, she usually shows us pictures to communicate, or she points. She really wants to learn sign language. We have pulled up a couple of YouTube videos for her. She appreciates it.
Another way they communicate is by sharing their emotions. Sometimes we can just feel what they want or need. There is just a sense of knowing when they come closer to the rest of us inside.
That's very true. Yes, feeling their emotions can help indicate what they think or, feel about something and help include them in the decision-making processes. Is there anything else you wanted to add to conflict resolution or decision-making as a system before we move on to our next important topic, which is figuring out and utilizing everyone's strengths?
Yes, the reality is it is impossible to make everyone happy all of the time. Sometimes selves will be unhappy and not get what they want. And that's okay. The point is to include everyone and try to make sure that all selves experience enough yeses to their requests. You want to include all of you. It's an opportunity to repair a lot of neglect and abandonment wounds when you bring everyone together to participate in life.
So true. Couldn't have said it better myself. I also think when all selves are included on a regular basis, you figure out everyone's strengths, and having your others be involved in the life then equates to having all of your strengths combined and utilized. You figure out very quickly just how powerful you all are working together as a team, and you end up discovering that all of yous add up to being even more of a superhuman because of everyone's wide variety of skills and interests.
Yes. Leanna was the first one in our system to really grasp this concept of working together, utilizing everyone's strengths, and being okay with not always being in control. She was our most well-rounded self, and often everyone would retreat to let her handle basically everything because she was viewed as good with everything. Leanna, though, couldn't do everything all by herself. It was too tiring. She knew she needed to delegate more responsibilities to the others. She often says, "I'm not the only one living in this body." She was able to look at the others and reinforce those positive affirmations. She would say, "Kilera, you're best at physical activity. You need to front when it's time to exercise." Or she'd say to Victoria, "You're good at managing the kids, cooking and cleaning. You need to front and figure dinner out." Often there were times when ourselves forgot their strengths, but Leanna was there to remind them. How did you identify everyone's strengths?
Well, before I answer that question, I just want to say that I really need to take a page out of your book and focus on being intentional about delegating more tasks to my others that fit their unique strengths. When I do remember to do this, my stress and anxiety goes down. Plus, my others feel more included and like they are being an active part of life as well, that they aren't missing out. The truth is, I didn't consciously sit down one day and list out everyone's strengths in the beginning, that is. Actually did sit down one day and identify and write down everyone's strengths just to kind of lay it out there and organize it all in my head. But before that happened, in the beginning, it wasn't a conscious thing. I figured out Journey was really good at being calm at work and being calm in general after I had checked out one day. Literally, I was so up to here with everything, stressed out and triggered and done, that I was gone. And in my absence, Journey was the one that was out going to work and running things. After calming down and having a rest, I came back to find that everything had gone really well. So it was in instances like that where I kind of accidentally found out about another of my other's strengths. And that led to me wanting to be out and co-conscious with Journey more. Because when her and I are around, both together at the same time, I feel a lot more calm. And it's wonderful to feel that way.
A lot of finding out everyone's strengths is kind of just like that. It's often not intentional. But when we were able to recognize the strengths, we were able to start being more intentional about it. Sometimes it is easy to pick out the strengths of some of ourselves, and for others, it is much harder, especially with those parts of ourselves that we might view as darker, or for selves that operate as introjects. We have had selves that we just wanted to lock away inside because we struggled to find anything positive about them. This might be particularly true for the parts that were intentionally created by abusers. We had one such part, and there was so much hatred for her and the way that she behaved and communicated. It actually took a lot of EMDR to see her differently, and we can now appreciate the strength she has of not being afraid. Finding her strength was an intentional exercise for us.
So true. I entirely agree. Some part strengths are super easy to identify, and others are a lot harder. Other selves whose sole purpose seems to be to keep the others from talking or telling, or parts that hurt other parts internally, yeah, it's hard to see their strengths initially. After lots of EMDR, my others that fell under these categories did eventually see that they could protect us in other ways now, that these old ways of protection actually were hurting us, not helping. As soon as they buy into the here and now, these parts typically do become fierce protectors, or in a couple of my parts' case, they actually just kind of faded away because their original job wasn't needed anymore. And our trauma that they were associated with was healed with time and therapy.
Yes, this is what happened with Jenny and Vivian. Once Jenny conquered her own fear, she was able to see that Vivian was, in essence, protecting her from the fear by not being afraid and taking over when needed. Then, instead of viewing Vivian as this horrible self that wasn't properly afraid of said event happening to us, she was able to see that her ability to not be afraid really saved us. And once Vivian started being seen as a protector instead of a villainous part, she really calmed down internally, and we had so much more peace inside.
Exactly. And once you identify your other strengths, the next step for us was, and still is, setting reminders for ourselves so we can utilize said strengths. For example, we set alarm reminders on our phone and calendar at certain times of day and for certain events that come up within a week or month. When we know a certain part should be running the show or driving the bus, so to speak, at any given point, we set a reminder to, remind us to tap that part on the shoulder internally and say, hey, your turn.
This is really where learning to switch on purpose can be so helpful. Being able to access whichever self is needed for any given task or event goes a long way to improving daily functioning and maintaining internal peace between everyone. One surefire way to create some discord is to not show up for the thing that you are good at doing. Victoria was pretty ticked off when she was stuck fronting and we were at work as a financial advisor quite some time ago. Dealing with numbers and finances and money was not her thing. We needed Leanna for that. But Leanna was nowhere to be found that day for whatever reason. I mean, of course, back then we didn't have a good understanding of strengths and weaknesses for all of ourselves, so we didn't know how to tap into the strengths of the rest of the system. For us, switching has become a very natural and fluid thing for our system. It's relatively easy for most of our daily encounters to access who we need when we need them.
Things like learning to switch on purpose and what to do when you can't access a part that needs to be out at any given point, and basically learning to be able to access who needs to be out when they're needed would all be really good topics to cover in an upcoming podcast episode, I think, Garden System.
Oh, absolutely. We can talk about those topics next week. Let's also dive into the denial and acceptance of being a multiple. Overcoming the denial, acceptance of being who we are, and learning to switch on purpose instead of it happening involuntarily is all part of learning to become a team.
Yay! I can't wait. So, to summarize, in this episode, we talked about resolving internal conflicts. We discussed the concept of developing trust by proxy because we have learned that building trust between ourselves is key to resolving internal conflicts. We also talked about how many systems fear one of their others taking over the life and changing everything, which is why it is important to include all selves in the decision-making process. We included several personal examples of this and how we manage plans that are decided upon in daily life. Garden System and I also talked about how to include parts in the decision-making process that are nonverbal. We conclude that it is impossible to make everyone happy all the time. We then talk about when you work together as a system, you end up utilizing everyone's strengths. We also go over how to identify the strengths of others in your system, which leads to you becoming and living your best life.
Until next time,
thank you for hanging out with a couple of multiples.
We are honored to have a Gold Plus sponsor for Season 2.
The Institute for Creative Mindfulness is one of the largest EMDR therapy training programs in North America, founded and directed by Dr. Jamie Pless-Marich, author of Dissociation Made Simple. Dr. Jamie is the only EMDR therapy trainer who is out as a plural, and since 2015, she's offered the full EMDR therapy basic training in a way that honors lived experience and destigmatizes dissociation in clinical work.
We have never felt more accepted and validated as a multiple than when we were able to show up authentically as Garden System for our basic EMDR training. Having lived experience is valued and respected in these training courses.
Go to www.instituteforcreativemindfulness.com for a full list of upcoming trainings, both online and in person, offered by Dr. Jamie and her selected network of EMDR trainers. Thank you to our bronze sponsor, Alex Amar, LCSW, who offers weekly creative art classes, including the Creative Journal, Soul Collage, and Altered Books, all on the Zoom platform exclusively for people living with dissociation.
For more information, check out her website at alexamar.com, spelled ALIXAMAR.com, or her Facebook page, Dissociative Creative Explorations. Are you interested in becoming a sponsor? Please send an email to admin@acoupleofmultiples.com to request more information.
From your hosts, Drew
and Garden System,
thank you for listening to A Couple of Multiples, the reality of dissociative identity disorder. This podcast is intended for educational purposes and is not a replacement for therapy.
Listening to this podcast does not constitute a therapeutic relationship with the hosts or any guest speakers.
If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review. We would love to hear what you enjoyed the most.
You can visit our website at acoupleofmultiples.com for additional information, including how to join our new online paid community called Hearts Multiplied, to access additional resources, and to also subscribe to our mailing list to receive future updates.
Remember, you matter and are loved for being all of yous.